Benissimo, adesso ya siamo sul vivo. Good afternoon, Father Jarosław.
Good afternoon.
We are happy and we are blessed also. We think that you are here with us. I will present you. Father Jarosław is a professor of theology. He has habilitation in dogmatic theology for the Pontifical Academy of Theology in Krakow, and STD in the area of moral theology, the John Paul II Institute for Studies of Marriage and Family, Washington, D.C., and STL in the area of moral theology, John Paul II Institute for Studies of Marriage and Family, Washington, D.C., and STM, the Pontifical Academy of Theology in Krakow. He's also chairman of the organization John Paul II Days in Krakow. Until now, he's also the president of the Polish Society of Dogmatic Theologians, a member of the Scientific Council, Institute of Intercultural Dialogue in Krakow, member of the Program Council, John Paul II Institute, Catholic University of John Paul II in Lublin. Also member of the Scientific Council of the Centro of John Paul II in Warsaw, and associate professor of the Pontifical University of John Paul II, and associate professor in the Pontificio Instituto Giovanni Pablo II per studi sul Matrimonio e la Familia in Rome. Finally, he is also the visiting professor for the Pontifical University of St. Thomas Aquinas at Angelicum in Rome. He is also author of 8 books and 48 articles, and also he has edited with another professor 7 books. He's here to talk about the personal, nuptial, and parental meaning of the human body. So I will give you the word. Thank you a lot, Father Jarosław.
Dr. Espindola, thank you for the kind introduction, and thank you to the whole staff at the Centro de Formación Juan Pablo in Argentina, in Buenos Aires, for the kind invitation to speak on your conference. I follow your work on the internet, and I deeply admire your work that you do for the John Paul II intellectual heritage. So thank you once again for this kind invitation to speak at your conference. I chose the topic very fundamental for theology of the body of John Paul II, the meaning of the body, personal, nuptial, and parental. We can certainly look at the theology of the body from many points of view. Theology of the body of John Paul II is a biblical theology, is a certain exegesis of important fragments of the Holy Scriptures from the Old and New Testament that refer to the human body. From this point of view, theology of the body is also a theological anthropology. It speaks about the human person. Theology of the body of John Paul II is also a proposal of Christian ethics for Christian couples, and not only for couples, for everyone in our reference to our own bodies. Theology of the body is also a defense of Paul VI's encyclical Humane Vitae. But if I would like to choose from all those descriptions of the theology of the body the most important, I would say that theology of the body is mostly anthropology. Anthropology, a certain vision of the human person. This is very important to think about theology of the body as anthropology. Why? Because sometimes we fall into a danger of seeing ethics in terms of concentration on moral norms. In other words, we ask the question, what is the norm that I should follow? What is the moral norm that I should fulfill? This is an important question. However, the more fundamental one is who I am. What is the nature of my person, of the state of life that I have chosen as a married person, as a priest, as a religious? Because from the truth of who I am comes the truth, how should I act? How should I behave? So the topic of my today's lecture, the meaning of the body, refers to this most fundamental dimension of who I am as a bodily person, as an embodied, somebody who is embodied, for whom the body is not something external, strange, but is something fundamental. Before we get to the essence of John Paul II teaching of the meaning of the body, we have to say a couple words about the cultural situation in which we find ourselves, cultural situation of anthropological dualism. Anthropological dualism in contemporary culture prevents us from seeing who we are as a bodily and spiritual beings, as human beings, as person. As always, trying to explain something, we go to genealogy, we go to history, because history helps us to understand where we are and what are the cultural currents that shape us. In terms of the cultural genesis of anthropological dualism in science and culture, we certainly would have to mention at least three names. The first is Galileo Galilei. All the three fathers of modern culture, fathers of modern anthropology, fathers of modern science, fathers of our modern self-consciousness, all lived in the first half of 17th century. So first Galileo Galilei, then Francis Bacon, and then, of course, René Descartes. We do not have much time to go into depth into their thinking. After all, it's quite well explained in many books, many articles. I did this explanation in my book on the theology of the body called Gift and Communion, where I have quite a number of pages devoted to those roots of anthropological dualism. So let me just quickly say a couple summarizing remarks. Galileo Galilei is very often seen as the one who laid the foundation for the mathematization of science. This introduction of mathematics to science has been at the root of the great success of modern abstract science. However, there was also a downside to this effort of mathematization of science. After Galileo, science gradually gave up a theological, internal understanding of natural phenomena that were previously considered the manifestation of hidden meaning and began to see them as mathematically analyzable set of relations. as consequence of this mathematization of science, was treating nature as a world of physical bodies, closed in itself, governed by natural causality, which determined every event before it took place. So, of course, always the question is, what about spiritual nature of the human beings? What about this ontological phenomenon that that is the human person with its spiritual dimension? The body can be analyzed as other bodies in the nature, physical bodies, material bodies. But certainly this attempt to analyze the human body only as a physical body became, with centuries, a root of the contemporary dualism, contemporary anthropological serious problem. The second thinker is Francis Bacon. Francis Bacon can be seen as the first thinker who consciously outlined the famous modern sentence, knowledge is power, and even more. True knowledge consists in power. And even in a different formulation, any knowledge that does not bring a domination of nature, that does not teach us how to control nature, is futile, is false. Any knowledge that consists purely in the contemplation of reality or in tending to answer the perennial question, what is truth? This knowledge does not add anything to human progress, should be abandoned. So, after Bacon, more and more, the goal and main criterion of true science consists in exercising human governance over nature, a way, as writes Francis Bacon in his famous book Great Instauration from 1620, a way must be open for the human understanding entirely different from any hitherto known, and other helps provided in order that the mind may exercise over the nature of things the authority which properly belongs to it. Bacon consciously reduces the famous four causes of Aristotle to two, efficient and material, because these two allow to see reality as controllable, as possible to control, to manipulate, to govern. The other two, formal and final, they belong to the futile realm of metaphysical speculation. They are not required. And the third person that should be mentioned is René Descartes, one of the fathers of modern subjectivism, the author of the famous formulation cogito ergo sum. At the beginning of his treatise on man, Descartes states, I suppose the body to be nothing but a statue or machine made of earth, which God forms with the explicit intention of making us as much as possible like us. Thus, God not only gives it externally the colors and shapes of all the parts of the bodies, but also places us inside all the parts required to make it walk, eat, breathe, and indeed to imitate all those of our functions. So the body is just a material, deterministic machine in which there is this something which we can call cogito, res cogitans. Now in the modern times we call it ego, self, self-consciousness, and so on, which uses the body as an instrument, as a machine to fulfill own ideas, own functions. There can be no better formulation of what the anthropological dualism is about. Certainly, there is no possibility of understanding the contemporary quarrels in bioethics, in the controversial areas of contraception, in vitro fertilization, different ideas of post-humanism, of making the human body better in terms of certain post-human function, if not going back to anthropological dualism. This dualism contradicts clearly the Christian vision of the human person. And in a sense, if we want to understand why we have this clash between the Christian understanding of reality in the areas which I mentioned, especially in bioethics and all the areas connected to transhumanism, we have to understand that the dominating in the contemporary culture dualism is in a very strong conflict with the Christian view of the human person. I will try to outline this Christian view of the human person in reference to the body. But first, let me talk shortly about the John Paul II criticism of anthropological dualism and how John Paul II sees the roots of anthropological dualism. A very interesting, this is the second part of my paper. So the roots of anthropological dualism. There is a very interesting reflection of John Paul II on the roots of anthropological dualism in the human culture and human history. In John Paul II's reflection on shame. As we know from the theology of the body and from reading the second and third chapter of the book of Genesis, shame was the first consequence of human sin. In John Paul II's theology of the body, I treated quite extensively in my book, Gift and Communion. John Paul II distinguishes in Adam and Eve experience of shame the four dimensions. So he speaks about the vertical shame, relational shame or sexual, immanent shame, and cosmic shame. I will concentrate on the immanent shame because it refers directly to anthropological dualism, but first let me quickly define the other dimensions of shame. Vertical, Adam and Eve are ashamed of God, before God, after they sinned. So they hide. For John Paul II, following German phenomenologist Max Scheler, shame is primarily a fear. So Adam and Eve hide before God in the bushes because they are ashamed and because they fear God for the first time. There is a change in the image of God. Extremely interesting idea. We do not have time here to elaborate it. The second dimension of shame is a relational, sexual shame. It's obvious. Adam and Eve hide the sexual parts of their bodies after the sin. So they are ashamed of each other, of their sexuality. Also, in John Paul II analysis, this is a fear. fear between them, fear of them. The third element is a cosmic shame. Adam and Eve, for the first time, are afraid of the cosmos, of the whole reality, of what we can call nature. The certain friendship, the certain unity in the world of creation is gone. The earth, heaven, cosmos is being seen as Adam and Eve as a danger, as a threat to them. We also will leave this dimension to concentrate on the fourth, on the immanent shame. What is the immanent shame? The immanent shame, according to John Paul II, is the experience of Adam and Eve in relationship to their own bodies. Let me quote a couple of texts from the Theology of the Body. So, the immanent shame experienced by Adam and Eve is a specific difficulty in sensing the human essentiality of one's own body, or a certain fracture in the human person interior, a breakup of man's original spiritual and somatic unity. The man who experiences immanent shame, Adam and Eve after the sin, realize for the first time that his and her body has ceased drawing on the power of the Spirit, which raised him and her to the level of the image of God. So the immanent shame in Adam and Eve is an internal fracture, internal division that after which Adam and Eve do not see their own bodies as part of them. Using another sentence, we could say that for the first time, Adam and Eve are dissatisfied with their own bodies. The body becomes an obstacle. The body becomes a problem. The body is not me. Which is? What is the body? The body is strange. The body is something added to me, which becomes a problem. So, in this theology of shame, according to John Paul II, we have enormous load of subject things to reflect upon. After the sin, the God is a problem. Sexuality becomes a problem. The cosmos is a threat, is a problem for Adam and Eve, but also they themselves are problems not only for each other, but for themselves. Adam is a problem for Adam. Eve is a problem for Eve because of the body. The body becomes a problem for the person for the first time. Body is no longer personal. Body is something added to the person. It's extremely interesting because John Paul II sees the roots of anthropological dualism right in this ontological catastrophe that happened after the original sin. After the body is no longer drawing from the grace given us by God, body becomes a problem for the human person. Let me quote two more texts explaining this. As John Paul II says, the sacramental dimension of the body in the mystery of creation is diminished after original sin. Before original sin, the human body has been a visible and transparent sign of the person. It had been marked, as we read in the Theology of the Body, as the visible factor of transcendence, in virtue of which man, as a person, surpasses the visible world of living beings, animalia, the end of quotation. So not only the human spirit before the original sin was a sign of man's transcendence and man's dignity, but also the body. I will explain it more in the later part of the lecture. So after the sin, the body loses its transparency, obviousness, as an expression of the person. The body is no longer personal, almost like in René Descartes. The body is a machine. What is this body? Added to myself, asks Adam and asks Eve. Animal body, added to the person. So the body is under suspicion. Body becomes a suspect. Body becomes strange. Body becomes a problem. As we read, and this will be the last quotation in this second part of the lecture, as we read in the Theology of the Body, as if the body, in its masculinity and femininity, ceased to be free from suspicion, as a substratum of the communion of the person, as if its original function, writes John Paul II, were called into doubt in the consciousness of man and woman. What disappears, he continues, is the simplicity and purity of their original experience, which help to bring about a singular fullness of mutual self-communication. So the body is under suspicion by Adam and Eve. The body is called into doubt, writes John Paul II. What is required then? You see, we describe the theological roots of anthropological dualism. Now we have to go further and ask how to save the situation. And what is required, says John Paul II, is a new reconciliation with my own body. Adam and Eve must be reconciled with their own bodies. How to do this reconciliation with own body? How to see the body not as a strange, as a problem, as something added to the person, but as deeply personal. We have to discover the meaning of the body. The new discovery of the meaning of the body is necessary for a new reconciliation with the body. Why? Because the human person can never be reconciled just with the animal body, right? Just with the material machine, as in Descartes. My body has to be seen as personal. How to do it? This is the third part of my lecture. According to John Paul II, the help in this reconciliation with own body comes from the Holy Scripture. That's why theology of the body is a biblical theology. The Bible provides over and over again a new inspiration how to solve our cultural, philosophical, and theological, anthropological problems. So, John Paul II is clearly aware of the reductionism of modern anthropology and culture. He says, "We are in fact the children of an age in which, due to the development of various disciplines, the integral vision of man presented in the Holy Scriptures, especially in the New Testament, can easily be rejected and replaced by many partial conceptions that dwell on one or another aspect of the compositum humanum, but do not reach man's integrum or leave it outside their field of vision. Various cultural tendencies then insert themselves here that are based on these partial truths." The end of quotation. So these are René Descartes, Galileo, Francis Bacon, partial attempts to explain who we are. But we have to look for the integral explanation. And the Holy Scripture becomes a source of this explanation. Let me give you one more text of the theology of the body. "The science of itself does not develop the consciousness of the body as a sign of the person or as a manifestation of the spirit. The whole development of contemporary science of the body as organism has rather character of biological knowledge, because it is based on the disjunction between what is bodily and what is spiritual. When one uses such one-sided knowledge of the body, functions as an organism, it is not difficult to treat the body more or less systematically as an object of manipulation." Francis Bacon. "In this case, man no longer identifies himself subjectively. Man no longer identifies himself, so to speak, with his own body, because it is deprived of the meaning and dignity that stem from the fact that this body is proper to person." End of quotation. So, the problem of contemporary culture is not seeing the body as a sign of the person, as a manifestation of the spirit. The body is being analyzed purely as organism, biological organism. So biology becomes the primary science, the primary method, provides method to analyze the human body. But in this way, we are nothing more than the rest of animalia, than the rest of the animals. This is the contemporary problem. And then John Paul II turns to the Holy Bible to look for an inspiration how to analyze the human body differently. And he finds, first of all, the inspiration in the description of creation in first two chapters of the Holy Bible, in the first two chapters of the book of Genesis. This is one of my favorite quotations from the whole theology of the body. So, as we know, John Paul II, when he uses the word beginning, he refers to Genesis 1 and Genesis 2. The beginning, he writes, tells us little about the human body in the naturalistic and contemporary sense of the word. From this point of view, we find ourselves in the biblical studies on the wholly pre-scientific level. We know almost nothing about the inner structures and regularities that reign in the human organism. Nevertheless, at the same time, perhaps exactly because the text is so ancient, pre-scientific, The truth that is important for the integral vision of man reveals itself in a simpler and fuller way. This truth concerns the meaning of the human body in the structure of the personal subject. The end of quotation. Dear listeners, here we have the definition of what is the meaning of the human body according to John Paul II. What he thinks about when he says meaning of the body or sense of the body. It refers to the meaning of the human body in the structure of the personal subject. Meaning of the human body in the structure of the personal subject. So we are not concerned here just with the biological workings of the human body. We are not concerned here with the analysis of human body as organism. Biology tells us a lot about that. We are asking different questions. If the human body is a body of the person, what is the meaning of the body for the person? And this is, I come to the fourth part of my lecture, which is concerned with the personal meaning of the body. I will proceed also to speak about the nuptial, parental, and filial meaning of the body. So the personal meaning of the body. The body is a body of a person. Even more, there is no human person without a body. There is nothing in the personal dimension of the human being which can go without the body. This is the difference between human person, persons in God, and angelic persons. Persons in God are pure relations, immaterial, uncreated. Angels as persons are immaterial but created. Human persons are bodily. In other words, in the realistic anthropology, and we have to take it very seriously, there is nothing personal. And I am aware that because of the different disputes, what is really human person, what I am going to say now is going to be scrutinized and sometimes perhaps criticized, but being standing on the foundation of the realistic metaphysics that John Paul II follows in the theology of the body, Aristotelian Thomistic metaphysics, modified, yes, but not rejected. We have to say, aware that this is a strong statement, that there is nothing personal in the human person that is not coming through the body. There is, I will repeat it, in the realistic metaphysics, there is nothing personal in the human person which is not coming through the body. Let me explain. We think quite often about the spiritual dimension in the human person in the Platonic terms, that there is this direct line between what we know, what we desire, and God and the spiritual realm. But In fact, the realistic metaphysics teaches us that all our knowledge comes from our body, comes from our senses. There is nothing, as the ancient statement says, very important for John Paul II. He repeats it in his magnum opus, philosophical magnum opus, The Acting Person, nihil in intellectu, nisi in sensu. There is nothing in the human intellect, in terms of our concepts, in terms of our understanding of reality, that does not come through our senses. So, also our knowledge about God, who God is empirically grounded, comes through our body. So, as John Paul II says in the Theology of the Body, human person is a body between the bodies, but a body very specific, a body which is ontological speciality, because it's also body. In this body there is an intellect, there is a spiritual realm, but this realm is not divided through the body. So everything personal, including our knowledge of God, comes through the reflection on the world that we have around us. Think about any term that you use in relationship to God. Perhaps the most simple, God is. Perhaps God is love. God is good. God is three persons. If we think clearly about any one of those concepts, they are all taken from our own experience. Is existence, after all. We experience material existence, existence of our bodies, existence of the world around us. Through this experience, we are able to think about existence which is not material. For example, existence of our thoughts, or existence of the laws of nature. And in this way, we can, according to the theology of Pseudo Dionysius about forming the theological concepts through triplex via, we can think about the language that we use toward God. But everything personal starts with our bodies, goes through our bodies. This is a very fundamental intuition of the theology of the body. The second meaning of the body is nuptial meaning of the body. There is no better sentence to summarize this nuptial meaning of the body than the title of the book of one of the former professors of John Paul II Institute from Rome, José Granados, La carne si fa amore. I guess in English we can translate this title in a couple different words. One of the possible translations would be the body is something designed for love. The body is designed for love. What does it mean? It means that the body is always masculine or feminine. But Dr. Christopher West makes out of this intuition, uses this intuition quite often in his conferences. The male body does not make sense without the woman's body. The masculinity in itself does not make sense if we do not compare it what is the feminine body. So the body itself is designed as to be an instrument of love, which is primarily sexual. Why is primarily sexual? Because that's how we have been designed by God, and that's how we multiplicate. It's similar to the rest of the world, it's similar to the animal world, but be aware, everything that is similar in humans to animal world, we do, but we do it as humans. We eat similarly to the way animals eat, but we eat as humans. Humans procreate like animals procreate, but we procreate in a human way, participating in the dignity of the parenthood and fatherhood of God. So this is, of course, this is a subject for a totally different lecture, but we are here at the beginning of the large subject of the relationship of agape to eros. Eros has to be, and this is the theology, this is what John Paul II does in the theology of the body. Human eros has to be cleaned from the Manichaean understanding. There is nothing intrinsically evil about human sexuality, about human body, and about human materiality, as always the Gnostic religions and Gnostic sects would hold. Eros, Benedict XVI outlined it very clearly in his encyclical Deus Caritas as eros is to be transformed, human eros is to be transformed into agape. Nuptial love starts with the body. Nuptial love is grounded in the human body, in the bodily desires. The bodily desires has to be cleansed, has to be transformed, have to be elevated by grace. But there is nothing intrinsically evil about human desires, also the sexual desires. Of course, the large subject that opens itself here is the whole very bold reinterpretation of John Paul II of the classical Western theology of Imago Dei, of Augustine and Thomas Aquinas. But this is again a subject for a different lecture. So the body has a nuptial meaning. Our likeness to God is not closed in the human mind, as in a sense Augustine and Thomas Aquinas tended to think. Our likeness to God is present in the wholeness of who we are as persons, as bodily persons. Also, the likeness of God is somehow present in the human body. So this is the nuptial meaning of the body. And then parental meaning of the body. Of course, the parental meaning of the body follows on the nuptial meaning of the body. Why? Because for obvious reasons, humans always knew how to beget children. Humans for 1,000 years of our history did not need classes of sexual education because they knew how to procreate. The procreation follows on love. People making love give birth to children. This is banal but extremely important subject for further reflection. I started this conference with a reminder that John Paul II wrote Theology of the Body partially as a defense of Paul VI's widely criticized encyclical Humane Vitae. This defense of Humane Vitae, in the intention of first Karol Wojtyła in 1970s and then John Paul II, this defense of Humane Vitae was supposed to be anthropological. Karol Wojtyła, after Humane Vitae was published, was not satisfied with the form of Humane Vitae. And as he wrote in his letters to Paul VI, he was explicitly saying that Humane Vitae has to be explained to people because of its very laconic, very metaphysical, dry language. People will not understand it. It has to be explained in terms of a certain Christian anthropology, because only inside a Christian anthropology, the ethical teaching of Humane Vitae makes sense. And in a sense, the Humane Vitae is lacking this anthropological explanation. This is what theology of the body was meant to be, to supply the Christian anthropology, the anthropological explanation. And central in this explanation of and defense of Humane Vitae is a absolutely fundamentally important sentence from the letter to families of John Paul II. And I will, getting to the end of this conference, I would like to offer some final thoughts on this sentence from the letter to families. We read in the number 9 of this document, through the communion of persons, which occurs in marriage, and man and a woman begin a family. Bound up with the family is the genealogy of every individual, the genealogy of the person. Human fatherhood and motherhood are rooted in biology, yet at the same time transcended. The genealogy of the person is inscribed in the very biology of generation. The end of quotation. My dear listeners, this is sometimes reading the papal documents, we wonder whether it was written by the Pope, the one whose name is at the end of the paper, of the document, or it was written by papal theologians. We know that sometimes the Pope cannot write everything that he publishes under his name as a teaching of the Church. But certainly, if I would have to pick a sentence that was written by John Paul II, certainly this would be the fragment that I just read, and especially this wonderful sentence: the genealogy of the person is inscribed in the biology of generation. And by explaining this sentence, I will finish this quite long conference. Let me go from the first sentence. Through the communion of persons, which occurs in marriage, and man and a woman begin a family. That's clear. To begin a family, you need a communion of man and a woman, also sexual communion. Bound with the family is the genealogy of every individual, genealogy of the person. This is a wonderful statement, because more and more in the contemporary culture we ask, what is a person? Where is the specificity of the person? And John Paul II says, look, if you want to understand the person, you have to look at the beginning of the person. At the beginning, the genesis of the person is in the birth of the person. How does the birth and conception of the person start? Well, you need a mother and you need a father. From mother and a father, you have the biological organism of the person who is born. But from love of the father and mother, you have a sense of this person to live, because biology is not enough. So that's why John Paul II writes further, human fatherhood and motherhood are rooted in biology, right? Yet at the same time transcended. The genealogy of the person is inscribed in the biology of generation. If we want to ask, who is the person? What is the person? We have to look to the biology of generation, because biology of generation is not only biological, it's human. It's not organism that is born, but a person is born. It's not just from the sexual act that is born, but is born from two persons who should come together, united by love, to give a sense to this newborn human being. And the sense of love of every one of us is being born out of love to love further, to expand the world of love. This is the DNA of the person, to be born out of love to love, to have a life of love, love in relationship to God, love in relationship to others. So this is the parental meaning of the body, because all of this is not possible without the human body, without the body of the man and a woman. But it's not only the two bodies, they are two persons with intentions, expectations, dreams, and we hope primarily love. Of course, the question that opens itself in front of us, it's a question of great importance today, and I will not expand it, I will just mention it, is the filial meaning of the body. Because from the parental meaning of the body comes a filial meaning of the body. What is filial meaning of the body? Filial meaning of the body is a memory of who we are, because our body tells us who we are, tells us where we are from, who were our parents, how was the beginning of us, of the specific human person. In reflection and in confrontation with many contemporary techniques of producing human beings, this is a question of great importance. Reflection on the dignity of human person requires reflection on the way in which we are to be born, to come into this world. Those two things cannot be separated from each other. So as a final sentence, the personal, nuptial, parental, and filial meaning of the body are possible to be found again thanks to our relationship with Christ, thanks to our living in grace. This is a medicine for our contemporary problems with the body. This is a medicine and solution that leads to a reconciliation with our own body. Thank you very much for your patience. Thank you for listening. God bless you all.
I appreciate your dissertation. I thank you a lot, Father Kupczak, for your words. I think it has been enlightening to better understand the anthropology that is proposed to us in the first circle of the catechesis and the relationship with Mane Vitae of St. Paul VI. Also, this last sentence that you read to us about the personal, nuptial, and the parental meaning of the body, in specific, I have to underline that the sentence about the filial meaning of the body is very interesting, and I understand that it's maybe a guide to us for do another congress, no? Because it's very, very profound, and I think also enlightened for all the catechesis. No? I know that also El Padre Jose Granados has write something about this filial meaning of the body. No? I thank you a lot, Father Jarosław Kupczak.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Thank you very much. Goodbye. God bless.
God bless.